You're listening to The Manning Report with your host, James David Manning. The news behind the headlines.
I live in an environmental zone called Harlem, and there's a designation for its environmental hazards, or I should say an environmentally hazardous zone, Harlem. And let me point up a couple of reasons why this is a environmentally hazardous zone. Number one is that gas stations. Gas stations are in major urban areas such as New York City are placed strategically, and because of the fact that the constant selling of gas, the spilling of oil, the ingredients in oil, the chemicals in oil, they are deadly to the fumes. They pollute the air, they pollute the ground, they soak into the drinking water. And so gas stations in New York City, on the island where I live, are found primarily only in Harlem. Only in Harlem. If you want to go to a gas station in Midtown Manhattan or on Park Avenue, you're not going to find one. There's not gas stations on Fifth Avenue and 57th Street in the theater district or in the high rent districts. They don't allow gas stations in those communities because they're very hazardous operations, and so you have to put them out of the way. Now, in small towns, in rural areas, they're along main strips of drive or routes or your gas stations. There's not a lot of population. People don't live around them, or there might be other businesses, but even the gas stations themselves are sort of isolated on its own particular plot of land. But here in New York City, if you need gas for your automobile, you got to come uptown to Harlem. Who you are, you got to come uptown to Harlem or buy gas someplace else and then drive to your safety place on Park Avenue or Fifth Avenue. And so the fumes, the soaking of the ground, the oil, the fumes coming from the automobiles, the gas stations themselves, make the environment in Harlem, living very close to a gas station, very hazardous. The other thing is that New York City has a massive surface transportation system called the transit system, buses that take people all over New York City. Those buses are housed also in Harlem. The warehousing for buses, the warehousing for places where these buses are kept, where their engines are running and spewing diesel fuel and diesel oil and the mechanicals and all these thousands of buses are brought into the Harlem area and housed in a big warehouse in Harlem, which also hazards the air, makes the air dirty and unclean because of the buses themselves constantly spewing diesel smoke. Those two reasons. And then there are other items as well in terms of the number of people and their standards of living within the Harlem community, and communities like Harlem, I should say. Also in Bed-Stuy, you have gas stations as well. But you can't get these bus stations. They don't put these in the high rent district. They put them in the hazardous areas, such as where I live here in Harlem. Now, with respect to the environment is something that we all need to be concerned about in terms of cleaning it up. We certainly do. Even God himself spoke when he spoke ATLAH. He said Harlem will be so clean you can actually take off your shoes and walk barefoot. So God is an environmentalist, if you don't mind. However, I think this whole business about climate change and climate dynamics, so forth and so on, is a misnomer. And I'm not saying that the climate is not changing rapidly, that the earth is not getting hotter, that we're not having more floods on the Missouri River, the Colorado River, the Mississippi River, that the lowlands of the Ohio Valley are being saturated with floods, that across the southeast, you're having tornadoes ripping through Alabama, Mississippi, and in that area tearing up homes and killing people. And then you got the hurricanes hitting both Florida and coming up the East Coast all the way as far as New York and New Jersey. I'm not saying that these items are not increasing. And across the Caribbean, the hurricanes and the water levels, and even what's happening internally with the fires happening out on the West Coast and the forests being burned, and literally millions of acres of forest being consumed and entire towns being engulfed by fires. I'm not saying that that's not a reality. It is a serious one, as serious as cancer. But I'm not sure that simply climate or environmental issues, as is being discovered scientifically, are the reasons why, or is the reason why it's happening. It's happening because we're in the tribulation, and it's going to get a whole lot worse. There are going to be earthquakes and famines and fires and all kinds of things that are happening. However, I do think the approach that the Republicans are taking with respect to refuting the fact that something is going on in our environment, and that those people who are calling for a cleaner environment or to do something about it, the people that are calling for a cleaner environment or do something about it can clean up maybe the gas stations and can discover how to make the environment where people live, the fumes and the land around their drinking water a little safer. But we're in the tribulation. However, I'm not a fan of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I'm not a fan of hers. But I have to say she gave a stellar speech the other day refuting the ignorant. Now, and I say these are ignorant Republicans. They're just ignorant. They're ignorant. There's one of our followers on Twitter, Flint water system, where the mayor, the governor, and several local officials polluted the water in Flint, Michigan, and it was full of lead, full of feces, and the people were drinking in it and washing in it for years. And half the children and people of Flint are now sick and dying because of the polluting of the river they're running through Flint, Michigan. And politicians do this. I think Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez gave what I thought was a very powerful presentation the other day, refuting these Republicans who act as if there's nothing happening in our environment that we should be concerned about. Mr. Engineer, roll that clip.
We talk about the concern of the environment as an elitist concern. 1 year ago, I was waitressing in a taco shop in downtown Manhattan. I just got health insurance for the first time a month ago. This is not an elitist issue. This is a quality of life issue. You want to tell people that their concern and their desire for clean air and clean water is elitist? Tell that to the kids in the South Bronx, which are suffering from the highest rates of childhood asthma in the country. Tell that to the families in Flint, whose kids have their blood is ascending in lead levels. Their brains are damaged for the rest of their lives. Call them elitist. You're telling them that those kids are trying to get on a plane to Davos? People are dying. They are dying. And the response across the other side of the aisle is to introduce an amendment 5 minutes before a hearing in a markup. This is serious. This should not be a partisan issue. This is about our constituents and all of our lives. Iowa, Nebraska, broad swaths of the Midwest are drowning right now, underwater. Farms, towns that will never be recovered and never come back. And we're here and people are more concerned about helping oil companies than helping their own families? I don't think so. I don't think so. This is about our lives. This is about American lives. And it should not be partisan. Science should not be partisan. We are facing a national crisis.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a Bronx girl. She grew up just a few blocks from where I now sit. Maybe, 20 blocks from here is where she grew up. She's a Bronx girl. She, Cardi B, and J-Lo, Jennifer Lopez, they're all Bronx girls who are reaching some sense of stature in the scheme of things here in America. I'm not supportive of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and I don't think I ever will be, mainly because there's so many other things that I find that are ungodly, that are repulsive, that are unbiblical, that are anti-God, and that also, as much as she is lamenting against conservatives saying that people who are concerned about the environment are some sort of elitists, when the reality is people in South Bronx and Flint, Michigan, and other places like this are suffering greatly. But not just that, these senators and congresspersons from Ohio, from Iowa, from Nebraska, and the Missouri Basin, the Ohio Valley, need to be concerned about the flooding and the tornadoes and the hurricanes as well. So I think she has a valid point. And I thought that I would simply allow one to see her eloquence, which, you know, I'm not supportive of her, and I don't think that I ever will be, but I think she ought to be carefully watched, because anyone who can speak that succinctly and that clearly and passionately about issues may be somebody you might want to keep an eye on. It would be my intent, perhaps, to try to evangelize Sister Cortez, to bring her to understand the sanctity of life, that there's an assault upon life, upon children in the womb, that she and her kind or her ilk greatly support. They support abortion. She and her kind greatly support sodomy, man to marry man and woman to marry woman. They support a lot of other ideas that I think that are perhaps worse than environmental issues, as all of them are consuming and killing. So for those reasons, I would have the greatest of difficulties of having any sign of support for Cortez. But I do think this, that she certainly bears watching. And they are both wrong with respect to climate change. We're in the midst of the tribulation, and we're going to see a continual deterioration of the tribulation of the environment as we go forward. The ice caps are going to melt. There are going to be more hurricanes. There are going to be more tornadoes, and all these things are going to increase, along with the fact that the Midwest will not be producing grain. You're going to have famines, and there are going to be just a series of other things. And all of this is on the, there are going to be more fires. All of this is a reality that man cannot control. And I think what ocasio-cortez is trying to say, that man can control it, and she's just wrong. She's just wrong there. But I thought it would be interesting, since many of you do not get an opportunity to look at an alternative point of view, that I would present that to you at this time. This is a bit of a news blog we do, looking at spiritual wickedness in high places for the most part, making some observations about it and giving people a biblical foundation to the way of interpreting, rather than have Sean Hannity or Laura Ingraham or Janine Pirro or Anderson Cooper or Rachel Maddow or Don Lemon, Rush Limbaugh interpret what's going on in the world. You come to me and I'll tell you based on what the Word of God says. They'll just give you their worldly, sinful view. But the Manning Report will tell you what God has said, whether to say yea or nay, whether to go or to stay. You'll be led by the word of Almighty God. Come to the Manning Report on a daily basis to interpret the spiritual wickedness in high places, because there's plenty of it that's going on. And so I'm the Lord's servant, James David Righteous Rebel Manning, and I'm here to serve you with news and information.